Now, as well as Horus, Zeitgeist throws out some other ancient gods which it claims share parallels to Jesus. However, like Horus, these claims are based on no or incorrect evidence, or are purposely misleading. Attis, born of the Virgin Nana on December 25th, crucified, placed in a tomb for 3 days, resurrected. While the birthday is irrelevant, as stated before, the claim that Nana was a virgin before giving birth is unsubstantiated. For the claim, Zeitgeist provides James Fraser's The Golden Bough as proof. However, Fraser simply provides the common birth of Attis, as told by Pausanias, which tells of the demon Agdistis, who has his penis severed off and thrown to the ground. From it grows an almond tree, from which Nana picks a fruit and places it on her bosom, where it dissolves into her skin and impregnates her with Attis. For Zeitgeist to hold this up as a parallel to Christianity, let alone a virgin birth, is absurd and dishonest. Likewise, Zeitgeist's claim about Attis being crucified is entirely incorrect. The maker is forced to admit in his transcript that the actual cause of death as related by Pausanias is disembowelment under a tree. Likewise, his supposed resurrection is depicted as Attis returning to life as a pine tree, with his blood fertilizing the earth, which Acharya S. and others attempt to link to Jesus' resurrection in the Gospels. The place in a tomb and 3-day burial claim comes from John Jackson's Christianity Before Christ, which is a book shown to have purposely misquoted and fabricated claims to support its thesis, and which has been completely discredited, even by fellow Christ-mythers. For Zeitgeist to use it as a verifiable source is disingenuous. Krishna, born of the Virgin Devaki, birth announced by a star in the east, performed miracles with the disciples, and upon his death was resurrected. Okay, the virgin birth is just plain wrong. Zeitgeist cites Acharya S., who sources Graves, who makes many erroneous assertions involving Krishna anyway, such as claiming that he was born on December 25th, which Acharya S. parrots but Zeitgeist chooses wisely to ignore. The Srimad Bhagavatam records that Devaki had at least 6 sons, other texts say 8, before Krishna, making her in no way a virgin. Comparing the life of Krishna to Jesus is silly anyway. Zeitgeist cites the Bhagavad Gita, which mentions Krishna's birth being announced by his star, not a star in the east, as Zeitgeist claims. He performed miracles, yes, but this is an inane parallel. For the resurrection claim, Zeitgeist cites Doane, who only links to Higgins and not to an original document. It refers to Krishna having died and returned to his heavenly seat, without any source. Even so, this is a weak parallel, considering that many saviours go through some kind of rebirth. Higgins insteadly claims that Krishna was crucified, as does Acharya S. and Graves. But Zeitgeist wisely refrains from this very wrong claim. Krishna's actual death was being shot by an archer. There are really no close parallels here. Dionysus, born of a virgin on December 25th, travelling teacher who performed miracles such as turning water into wine, referred to as the King of Kings, God's only begotten Son, the Alpha and the Omega, and upon his death was resurrected. Again, the birth date is of no relevance, although the citation that Zeitgeist gives to Freke and Gandhi's The Jesus Mysteries actually lists his birth date as January the 6th. Freke and Gandhi is the only source for the virgin claim, however the reference given cites a statement made by Saint Epiphanius in the 4th century AD. Yet the citation does not mention Dionysus at all, but Aeon in Alexandria, who is a post-Christian god with nothing to do with Dionysus, Greek god of wine. Nowhere else can a virgin claim be sourced. The actual story, if you're interested, is that Zeus disguised himself as a thunderbolt and impregnated Semele. While it is true he was a travelling teacher, all he taught was how to cultivate wine. As for turning water into wine, being the god of wine, this would be easy to accept. Nevertheless, if we investigate this claim, we find it wanting. Zeitgeist cites Freke and Gandhi, who cite various sources of wine magic. Firstly, they cite Pliny in saying that on Andros, on the festival known as Theodosia, there flowed a stream of wine in the temple of Dionysus. But this isn't turning water into wine, as there had never been water in the first place. They also cite Pausanias, saying that Thea, the priests of Dionysus, placed 3 large empty cauldrons in a sealed room, to find them filled with wine when they returned the next day. But these buckets were empty to begin with, so we cannot use the water-to-wine motif here. The only water-to-wine motif Freke and Gandhi can find is Dionysus turning water into wine at his wedding with Ariadne. However, this is not to be found in pre-Christian writings, but is originally found in the Adventures of Leucippe and Clitophon, by Achilles Tatius, who is believed to have lived anywhere between the 2nd and 6th centuries, however no earlier than the late 2nd century. This is far too late to have influenced Jesus and Cana's story. In fact, it's likely that the Jesus story influenced it. He was not known as the King of Kings, as this title was reserved exclusively for Zeus. It is important to note that Dionysus was not a saviour god in the same way Jesus was. He was just one of the 12 gods of Olympus. Likewise, he could not have been known as God's only begotten son, as Zeus fathered other children. The Alpha and the Omega is unverifiable. The only original source for resurrection comes from a single inscription on Thassos, which reads, "A god who renews himself and returns every year rejuvenated." But what does this mean, and how is it linked to Christ's resurrection? Zeitgeist cites Fraser, who says that the resurrection of the slain god is not mentioned, but in other versions of the myth it is variously related, and that's all he has on the matter. The myth associated with this is that Dionysus, being shattered to pieces and then being reassembled by Apollo. So though a general rise from the dead can be implied, it has no relation to the complex and Christian theme of resurrection. Dionysus simply died each winter and returned each spring. There's nothing more that can really be said on this. Mithra, born of a virgin on December 25th, had 12 disciples and performed miracles, buried for 3 days and thus resurrected, referred to as the truth and the light. A sacred day of worship for Mithra was Sunday. Just a note, Zeitgeist combines both the attributes of the Persian god Mithra and the Roman god Mithras in this segment. The date of birth is once again irrelevant. Interestingly though, in the interactive transcript, Zeitgeist cites Fraser as saying that Christ's birth is not mentioned in the Gospels, and that it was just chosen to coincide with the winter solstice festival. This contradicts Zeitgeist's central thesis that Christ was a pagan saviour whose birth was specifically chosen, as he was the representation of the sun, rather than just being interpolation at a later date. As for the birth, Franz Cumont is considered the first person to explore this mystery religion in The Mysteries of Mithras, which was published in 1903. The book is quite out of date as the study of Mithraic religion has moved on significantly. However, it is frequently used by Christ mythers. It nevertheless makes highly contrary claims regarding the supposed virgin birth of Mithra. In fact, on page 132, Cumont says that Mithra was born from a rock, as shown by the various statues of him doing this. This remains the current theory for Mithra's birth, as shown in many books in the matter. Mithra was also born already as an adult, although you won't hear Christ mythers mentioning that. All claims in Carpenter O'Done are unsourced, or claim that being born from a rock counts as a virgin birth. Performing miracles is hardly noteworthy. Mithra did not have 12 disciples. The origin for this comes from Cumont, who claims that a statue showing Mithra surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac represents him having 12 disciples. Firstly, this is a very post-Christian carving. Secondly, nowhere else is it mentioned that Mithra had 12 disciples, and thus Jesus' mythers tried to claim that Mithra had 12 disciples because he is surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac. Acharya S. also confirms that 12 disciples are the signs of the zodiac, but offers no explanation for her judgment, other than saying Jesus had 12 disciples, so therefore these 12 are disciples. For the 3-day burial and resurrection, Zeitgeist cites Freke and Gandhi, who cite Tertullian, writing in 198 AD. In his Prescriptions Against Heretics, chapter 40, he writes, "If my memory still serves me, Mithra there, in the kingdom of Satan, sets his marks on the forehead of his soldiers, celebrates also the oblation of bread, and introduces an image of a resurrection, and before a sword wreathes a crown." So not only do we have a significantly post-Christian source, but we also rely on this man's memory. Also he claims that it is Mithra himself performing these actions, bringing the whole arguments into confusion. As for the 3-day burial, all modern Mithraic scholars agree Mithra never died. Freke and Gandhi don't mention the 3-day burial, but Zeitgeist cites Berry and Carpenter, neither of whom source their claims. This appears in no other Mithraic scholar's work. The scholarly consensus is that Mithra never died. I couldn't find anything in Zeitgeist sources to verify the titles. Mithra was known as the Warrior of Light by some, but I could not find any sources either independently or through his citations which confirmed their truth. While it is true that the sacred day of worship was Sunday, this only applied to the Roman Mithras. Zeitgeist then shows a page with a list of supposed copycat saviours taken straight from Acharya S.'s The Christ Conspiracy. Most of these are in turn taken straight from the world's 16 crucified saviours, which have already shown to be useless as a source. In fact, one saviour Graves wrote about, Bedru of Japan, has been shown to have not even existed, a fantastic example of the intellectual dishonesty of both Acharya S. and Zeitgeist. As for the rest of the names, Acharya S. only describes a handful of these, claiming that there is not adequate room to go into detail of all these mythological characters, but the truth is that they all simply have little or nothing in common with Christianity, and even the most basic research on any of them shows this. Using this slide is highly dishonest and irresponsible.